So which uni subject is relevant experience for which type of consulting? Are you more likely to be successful in consulting if you did a science or an arts degree? Does the degree that you do make a big difference to the consultancy that you might end up working at or to the projects that you'll work on? In this video, I'm going to cover all of these questions. You might be choosing which type of consultancy or consulting role to apply to, or wondering which degree to do, or you might even be thinking of switching careers and utilising your university education to help you land your new job. Whichever your circumstance, my intention is that this video helps you make your choice. Welcome back, by the way. I'm Charlie, a consulting senior manager and remote business owner, and my Consultant Explorer channel is to help you be so successful in your early years in management consulting that you're set up for total freedom to do whatever you want to in life. So knowing which uni degree is applicable to which type of consulting is much easier when you have hindsight of doing both. And given I've got 10 years consulting experience and a degree in PPE, I'm going to walk you through the types of things in consulting that I saw people do with the degrees that they had, and what I did too. The key here is that some uni degrees set you up for what's called a functional specialism track, whereas others set you up for an industry specialism track. And others are more general and don't necessarily put you in either category. But even with a more general degree, whichever consulting role that you end up in, you'll very likely end up developing either a functional or an industry specialism anyway. So let's have a look at the kinds of functional and industry specialisms that are available in consulting. You can think of it like a matrix, where the top row is all the functional specialisms and the side is all the industries, like this. Obviously, this isn't completely exhaustive, but it's a pretty good representation of the spread of functionalisms and industries that I've seen onshore during my career. You can see lots of industries down the left-hand side, and along the top, you can see specialisms are divided into strategy consulting, front and back office consulting, and boutique consulting. Within each of these types of consulting, on the second row, you can see the types of onshore roles that are typically available. So then you can read this matrix like this. If you're a financial services specialist, you might end up working on a project that sits within any of these functional specialisms. And if you're a marketing BA, you might end up working on projects in any of these industries. Every consulting project team has lots of functional and industry specialists on it, so you'll be on the same projects regardless of whether you're a functional or an industry specialist, meaning there isn't really any reason to have one over the other. It all comes down to personal preference and interest. So now let's have a think about which university degrees are relevant for which of the boxes on this matrix. And before stepping through lots of degrees, it's worth just considering this. Recognizing the strengths of your degree can absolutely help you position your knowledge, experience, and interests really effectively within your application for a consulting job. And depending on the degree, what you learned will help you to some extent in your day-to-day consulting job too, if your application is successful. But in reality, and in the most part, what you learned in your degree will not be overly useful to you on a day-to-day basis in consulting. You learn so much more on the job that you'll need to know to do a good job there. And that far outweighs what you learn at university. And actually, this is why ultimately a degree in any subject is good enough to apply to consulting. But there is a lot of importance in knowing how your degree sits into this consulting matrix, because it helps you know how to position your skills within your application to a consulting job. And also how to choose which consulting roles you might personally find the most interesting. Being aware of how your skills and your specific educational experience applies to consulting empowers you to make a much stronger job application, giving you an advantage over other candidates. And it also empowers you to be happier in the long run with the choice that you made. Okay, here goes, in no particular order. Let's start with what I studied. I studied PPE, which is Politics, Philosophy and Economics. And when I joined consulting, I took a BA or Business Analyst track in the front office space. On the face of it, there wouldn't seem to be much similarity at all between PPE and BA work in consulting. But what I found was that the ability to think about all sides of a problem, tackle through challenges, and come to a compromise of a solution, which is what you have to do both in philosophy and politics, is also really important to BA work. As a BA, you have to understand every corner of a customer or user's needs, asking pertinent questions that others might not think of. You have to find ways that business process and new tech can meet those needs, often using both lateral and logical thinking, given there are always a whole load of constraints and limitations. Critical thinking is super important to all of politics, philosophy, and business analysis work. And that sort of critical thinking isn't limited to politics and philosophy degrees. There are other degrees that require it too, like law or criminology, and to some extent social sciences too. So if you studied any of those, then you can position yourself well with the right skills for BA work. And the economics part of my degree was useful too, but from an industry perspective, not a functional perspective so much. Whilst politics and philosophy helped with the BA side of things, the work that I've done with and for banks and insurance firms was informed by the knowledge that I accrued through studying economics. I also have friends who studied economics who have been very successful in FS consulting, financial services consulting. So if there's even an element of economics to your university degree, then consider how to position yourself for an FS industry alignment or specialism. Let's consider computer science next. I've worked with a number of computer scientists in consulting. Typically they take up development roles, i.e. writing code, or development oversight roles, i.e. managing people who write code. Sometimes they also take solution architecture or enterprise architecture type roles, where they're assessing which technologies should be purchased or used to meet the overall business objectives. I'd say that if you study IT at university too, you could choose to sit in this architecture bucket. All of the above require familiarity with software, what it can do, and how it fits together or integrates. Okay, let's take an arts degree next. Studying art itself, or design, shows that you have creative talent and that you have studied perception, or that is to say, how others perceive something that you create. It also shows that you can conceptually map how individual parts might all come together into a whole. And actually that applies to something like architecture too. These skills are really important to the UX and UI design functional specialisms. That's user experience and user interface design, in which you're creating the journey and the experience respectively that a customer or user will take with a piece of technology. That involves understanding how they'll perceive it and how all the individual parts that you design will come together into that overall experience. So artists, designers and architects, you have the opportunity to position your skills within that context for consulting. And actually related to that would be the skills that you obtain when you study things like psychology, occupational therapy, counselling or anthropology. An understanding of humankind and the ways we think, believe, feel and act and have needs is so important when you're in a consulting job that has the responsibility of designing the journey or experience a human being is going to have to take. As a UX or UI designer, designing those journeys and experiences, you need to optimize them, not just to ensure the customer is happy with that experience, but also so that they do the things that the company wants them to do, like buy the item or sign up to the mailing list. So knowledge of human behavior and the drivers of it, and even knowledge of group behavior and how that dynamic shifts what humans might do, is paramount to great design. Okay, next is maths. People who are really good at maths typically have quite a specific type of brain. These people can be very talented consultants, generally in scenarios that require knowledge of or confidence in working with probabilities. The first is data science. If you're a key statistician, your skills will be in high demand in the data science space, building algorithms that underpin AI software, or building models that help to estimate the right answer to something, usually to help with a decision. And if data science isn't your thing, then strategy more generally could be. High-performing strategy consultants often have a really strong understanding of probabilities, because estimating probabilities of potential outcomes is important when determining which of many different paths to recommend a client strategically takes. Okay, next, marketing. You may have already seen where you can position yourself on this slide. If you've studied marketing, then you have educational experience that means that you can help to coach consulting clients on their marketing problems. Whole projects are spun up regularly in the marketing space to help client marketing teams improve or set up new processes or technologies. If you can be specific in your application about what you know in marketing and how you might be able to help clients improve their marketing functions, then it will be really impressive. Okay, let's take another sciencey one. If you studied physics, robotics, or engineering, and your modules involve designing tech, building tech, working with innovative tech, or writing code more generally, then you may well be best placed in a boutique consultancy firm that is focused on innovation, or in the innovation departments within the bigger consulting firms. You'll have hands-on knowledge that most consultants won't have, and you might get frustrated actually in a normal consulting role in a larger firm where you're much more management-y than you are hands-on. That said, a deep understanding of how tech works is an asset to any management-y role in consulting, because you'll be able to predict and spot problems that others might miss, and you'll potentially be able to propose more efficient ways of doing things. So if being less hands-on is something that actually interests you, then you could go for a tech BA, technical business analyst, or a technical analyst, or even an architect type role with your knowledge too. Right, onto education. And this is actually the last degree that positions you for a functional specialism as opposed to an industry specialism. The remaining degrees that I'll cover are appropriate for industry specialisms. So if you have an education degree, then you've learned how people learn and how to teach people. These are very important skills for change managers and training specialists in consulting, who are responsible for teaching users how to use new technologies or how to follow new processes. Every project that creates new software or introduces new ways of working for people will have some sort of change management and training function. So you'll have a lot of choice as to the kinds of projects that you want to work on. You'll likely need to choose whether you generally work on front office or back office projects, but outside of that, the world is your oyster. Okay, time for some industry specialisms. The degrees that I mention now set you up to work in an industry, which means that the projects that you work on will always be for clients in that industry, but might vary in terms of actual objective and functional content of that project. We already mentioned how economics sets you up to work for FS clients, and notice how aligning yourself to an FS specialism opens the functional opportunities. So which degrees align to other industries? Hopefully these are a little more obvious at least. Degrees in medicine, pharmacology, nursing, anatomy and physiology, and biological sciences all set you up to work as a healthcare industry specialist. Remember that consultants do work for a wide variety of companies and organisations within this pillar. So projects can be for pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, government bodies, and other care institutions. If you're studying any of those degrees, you can position your experience as relevant to all or any of those types of client. Okay, next. Degrees in music, hospitality, filmmaking, drama, communication and media studies could position you nicely for the telco, media and entertainment pillar. There's definitely a difference between being a creative in this industry and working for the companies who operate within the industry, but having an understanding generally of how the industry works from the perspective of an insider is definitely a good line to take in your consulting application. If your application is successful, it might not be that your day-to-day consulting job does anything like your more creative degree, but your knowledge of how media and entertainment clients are operating and why will give you a great edge and will be important to the consulting team that you're a part of. Similarly, a degree in food science is good experience for a consumer products industry alignment. FMCG, that is fast-moving consumer goods companies, like Nestle, Mars and other non-food equivalents, are all consulting clients. If you have deep knowledge in the kinds of processes these companies and their suppliers are going through to design, create and ship their products, then you can be potentially very helpful to a consulting team making these processes better and more efficient. You might even choose to specialise further on the functional side of things and choose a back office supply chain functional specialism. Other key supply chain projects are run by major manufacturers and automotive companies, who are another type of consulting client. If you studied mechanical engineering or industrial engineering or aeronautical engineering, then you should position your knowledge here for a manufacturing and automotive industry specialism in consulting. Again, your insider knowledge will be really important on the team of consultants who have been asked to improve existing processes for efficiency and effectiveness for a manufacturing or automotive client. And finally, if you've studied building or land and property management, I'd say you're best off applying to specialist consultancies who focus on town planning or construction and design consulting, something like Arup, for example. The knowledge that you have from your degree is much more applicable in those specialist scenarios than in more general management consultancy projects that deliver front and back office software to clients in the major industries. There are a number of degrees that I haven't mentioned, mostly because there is no strong link between the content of the degree and the various specialisms available in consulting. Of the degrees that I haven't mentioned yet, I would say that only the following have a loose connection that you could work with in your job application. If you studied any of English, creative writing, classics, or business and management studies, I suggest your skills are relevant to being a BA because you can write, think logically, and analyse how businesses work, respectively. If you studied dentistry, chemistry, or chemical engineering, then I'd suggest your skills might be relevant or at least adjacent to healthcare. Consultancies also do some work with chemical companies where your chemistry knowledge may be relevant too. The main thing to take away from all of this is that the better that you're able to articulate the skill set that you've acquired from your university degree and how it will make you a great team member on a project requiring functional skill X or industry specialism Y, the more likely you are to get the job. Targeting your experience in a way that sounds relevant makes it much easier for the recruiter or consultant who's going to read your application to understand where you can fit into the company and why you're going to be good at the job. So I really hope that something I've said today has resonated for you and that it sparks some ideas about how you're going to articulate the skills that you have. If it has, then let me know by liking the video. And if you'd like to see what I post next, then definitely subscribe to my channel. Social media links are below too if you'd like those. And if you have any questions or remaining comments, then feel free to use the comment section here and I'll do my best to answer absolutely everything. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day and I wish you all the best with your exploring.